2024 was an unforgettable year for gaming, delivering some impactful titles across many genres. It was also the year that Balatro, an indie game, was nominated for Game of the Year at the Game Awards. It didn't win, but it's a direct point of evidence that a single dev can make a game as impactful as a AAA game. It's fair to say that as time progresses, the indie scene continues to assert itself as the bedrock of innovation in the gaming industry. And it's from this melting pot of creative genius that my favorite indie game of 2024 was born, Crow Country. While it didn't receive the praise of contemporaries like Balatro or Animal Well, Crow Country, an indie horror game developed and published by SFB Games in the style of PlayStation-era graphics, very comfortably sits alongside these gems as a masterpiece in its own right. In a time long past, games were limited in their ability to reflect reality. Perhaps this is the reason that so many games back then seemed to carry a sense of whimsy that doesn't appear all that often today. But those technological constraints were simply a box to work within. Through sheer ingenuity and creative will, we were blessed with some truly inspired games that have a very lasting legacy. This is particularly true of the horror genre. At a time when gaming was really only finding its feet in the minds of the general population, horror was innovating and brought with it some unforgettable titles like Silent Hill, Resident Evil, and Clock Tower. Now look, if you're as old as I am, you probably remember avoiding eye contact with the cover art of these games as you browsed your local game shop in the hopes of avoiding a sleepless night. For those brave enough to play them, it's not enough to describe the gameplay itself without understanding the tone of the times that accompanied it. It is this essence that Crow Country so effortlessly captures and distills into an unforgettable rabbit hole that you absolutely must dive headfirst into for yourself. Crow Country is an isometric survival horror game that follows the story of Mara Forrest, a special agent investigating the disappearance of the owner of the titular theme park, Edward Crow. In her quest to uncover the mystery of Crow's disappearance, Mara finds that the park has devolved into a hellish nightmare, overrun with unknowable monsters with very few safe havens remaining. Save for her interactions with a few shady park attendants, Mara is completely alone, fighting against the odds in the deteriorated carcass of a once inviting locale. Its aesthetic is seeping in the era-defining low-poly PlayStation 1 graphics that was one of the main reasons that I was personally drawn to it in the first place. I closely followed the development of Crow Country. It just had this quality about it that on the one hand was unique and on another was familiar in a way that garnered so much curiosity for me. It reminded me a lot of those strange ARGs that you see people dedicate multiple hours analyzing on YouTube to, or those children's show parodies that are shrouded in grotesque undertones like Don't Touch Me, I'm Scared. And in a way, Crow Country is kind of thematically similar, taking a place of joy and happiness and an era of gaming whose legacy is remembered for its pure emphasis on cartoonish fun and turning it into a tortured reflection of itself. When we first joined Mara in Crow Country, the park is lifeless. There's an unassailable sense that it was abandoned very hastily. Posters, trash, and other indicators preserving a moment in time when some horrifying event occurred. Exploring the park, we find an injured man that's looking for the park's owner, much like ourselves, that has been injured by an unknown assailant. You're left with a choice to either help or leave him to an uncertain fate. Soon we come to learn that the entire facility has been overrun by creatures known as guests, which aptly provides them with a haunting implication. However, a part of the beauty of Crow Country is the breadcrumb approach that the creators take to the mystery behind the appearance of the guests, the disappearance of Edward Crow, and Mara's role to play in the events of the game. So far be it from me to rob you of the joy of experiencing those twists for yourself. I'll instead leave you with a message that the game story is certainly a strong point. In classical survival horror fashion, you're left with limited resources to survive and forced into uncomfortable and awkward encounters with terrifying creatures that keep you in a relentless state of anxiety. Playing this game on a controller felt really cumbersome, but that's a good thing. It felt bad in a good way. It was very rare that I found myself feeling that I had a particular combat situation within my control. I positioned myself at these really weird, odd angles just to ensure that I had the space between myself and the guests as I awkwardly took pot shots with with my trusty handgun. You are of course blessed with a limited arsenal later in the game, including the obligatory shotgun and a couple of other fun implements that you get to play with. But ammo is almost always scarce, and so learning to efficiently down the guests throughout the park is within your best interests. There is no progression system in Crow Country. There's no XP for defeating enemies or a skill tree to power up with, but this is a good thing. Taking true inspiration from its ancestors, Crow Country forces you to weigh up the benefits of a combat engagement before you enter it. The benefits largely being things like finding a new path through a yet untouched area of the park or clearing an area so it's safe for exploration. Otherwise, there's almost no advantage to downing the guests. And this might sound a little bit deflating at first, but trust me, you will have to fight and you will have to adapt to the clumsy, panic-inducing combat to complete your first playthrough. The only progression that you get, so to speak, is in the form of new weapons, which are an unexpected delight when you happen to chance across them. These weapons also feature a single upgrade that are awarded to you if you're willing to hunt the many secrets littered throughout the park. Enemy variation was broad enough that I didn't feel too much repetition in my 10 hours playing the game. Each enemy type brings with it unique challenges, from tanky titans to tiny speedy goblin creatures, and others that don't quite fit into any predefined category of enemy, just weird twisted things trying to bring harm to you. There are also boss encounters in the game, each with their own unique mechanics, and these events are hardly telegraphed at all by the game, just throwing you to the wolves in completely unexpected times. Crow Country, much like any other successful survival horror game, has a healthy capacity of subverting your expectations. Got a lot of ammo and health saved up? Boom, boss encounter. Getting used to shooting the standard lumbering guests? Here, have this weird, creepy, gangly man skeleton. Getting comfortable with puzzles? Have an instant kill fail clause, idiot. I think this is one of the most brilliant components of Crow Country. You're constantly rewarded for your curiosity, whether it be in-game or some unforgettable little experience that you would have otherwise missed. Crow Country pulls you into every dark corner to see what's hidden there. It's a distillation of what everyone expects from the survival horror genre, but condenses it into a joyful, terrifying, and moreish gaming experience. Now, it wouldn't be a survival horror game without a healthy smattering of puzzles either, which Crow Country delivers in spades. Some have all the obscurity of the infamous soda can puzzle in Silent Hill 2, while others pay homage to classical minigame tropes. One stands out very prominently is this mushroom fellow that would have you risk your life eating various kinds of dubious fungi. There's a knack to eating the right ones, and you'll be duly rewarded for your ingenuity. Another in the late game is a puzzle involving limericks and model trains that genuinely had me reaching for a notepad, and I was beaming ear to ear when I finally cracked it. Now, if that wasn't enough, the end game is also really fun in Crow Country. There are a total of 15 secrets for players to find. Now, I'm often the kind of gamer that skips over collectibles, finding tracking progress tedious, the effort unrewarding, and my interest waned by the conclusion of a game. However, the way that secrets seamlessly integrate themselves into Crow Country not only made me want to engage with the system, it had me spend time towards the end obsessively tracking down each one. The rewards are well worth it too. Everything from insightful lore through to unlockable weapons. You're also provided with an indicator on your map to help you track progress in ticking off each secret for each section of the game, lowering the barrier to entry for gamers similar to myself and dangling a nicely incentivized carrot in front of you to get that 100% completion. Upon completing the game, new game modes, secrets, costumes, and weapons are unlocked for you to find. Inspired by the Resident Evil franchise, some of these features are locked behind a secret ranking that you will receive at the end of the game, once you've finished appreciating the many names of the brilliant minds behind Crow Country. You see, you're being graded in Crow Country, so be on your best behavior and you'll be duly rewarded for your skill, courage, and curiosity. Crow Country confronts you with narrative choices throughout its runtime. They're altogether not that morally ambiguous or difficult to make, taking a typical kind of black and white, good versus bad approach, but it does inject a flavor of narrative control, incentivizing multiple playthroughs for different story outcomes. Our main story focuses primarily on Mara and her personal connection and journey within the park. Collectible lore throughout the game fills in the story gaps, drawing connections between the cast of characters you meet and providing some essential backstory to the history of the park. It's well worth reading these lore snippets as, for one, they're short, and two, they're not that hard to understand either. Crow Country doesn't take the path of a From Software game, hiding essential story beats in riddles and obscure flavor text. It's straightforward, engaging, and unique. It's palpable when playing Crow Country that the developers had intimate familiarity with the games that established the survival horror genre. At times, it felt like I was walking through a chibi version of Silent Hill or the claustrophobic hallways of Spencer Mansion. A concern I always have with tribute games is if they follow a known formula, they lose their identity in the process. In part, the brilliance of Crow Country is that it tongue-in-cheek leans into its inspirations, and in doing so creates a whimsical atmosphere that cuts through the horror like an after-dinner mint. But there's intention with Crow Country as well. Very intentional choices around its aesthetic, combat mechanics, survival horror elements, and setting that gives it its unique identity. The whimsy is the point as much as the moments of genuine terror that are littered throughout Crow Country's 10 hours of playtime. You're supposed to smile when you play a light-hearted minigame as much as you're supposed to panic when you're backed into a corner by some contorted monstrosity. It reminds me deeply of the Resident Evil 4 remake's shooting range minigames, a momentary respite from the horrors awaiting you outside. It's horror, but it's also a nod to a bygone era of gaming that could authentically take itself a little less seriously, that this generation craves a triumphant return from. Now, I suppose I've given you the impression that I like Crow Country because for the duration of this video, I've endlessly gushed about almost every detail. But this was intentional. I love Crow Country. One after another, the indie scene continuously established itself as the bedrock of innovation for the gaming industry, creating unique titles that are made by gamers for gamers, not motivated by corporate growth or KPIs, but by passion. And that's what Crow Country is, the culmination of a brilliantly creative vision brought to life by the very talented collective at SFB Games that warrants the praise that it has received by its modest fan base. In short, buy Crow Country. Play Crow Country, an underrated indie horror title that distills the essence of PlayStation-era survival horror, but differentiates itself by balancing it with gaming's most important feature, having fun.